Have you ever had the strange feeling that you understand people deeply, yet no one seems to understand you? That you can walk into a room and sense the mood instantly? Who's uncomfortable, who's pretending, who's hurting? But when it comes to your own inner world, there's nowhere for it to go. Some people call this sensitivity, others call it overthinking, but psychology has a different explanation. And if you felt emotionally alone growing up, this might finally explain why your mind works the way it does today. Because loneliness isn't always about being physically alone. Sometimes it comes from carrying experiences that were never witnessed, feelings that were never named, needs that were never answered. As a child, you may not have been obviously isolated. There were people around, family, school, noise, activity, life happening. But there was a subtle absence, a lack of emotional resonance. You spoke, but weren't truly heard. You felt, but weren't fully met. You reached outward, and nothing meaningful reached back. So your mind did something extraordinary. It turned inward. Not because you preferred it, because you had to. You learned to soothe yourself when comfort didn't come, to make sense of feelings without guidance, to process confusion alone, to become your own companion long before you were ready. And you didn't announce this shift. You adapted quietly. While other children learned that connection was reliable, you learned that self-reliance was safer. This creates a very specific kind of adult. People often describe you as independent, mature, thoughtful, even wise beyond your years. What they don't see is that this independence wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was an early survival skill. You became observant, careful, internally active. Instead of rushing toward the world, you learned to study it first. You began noticing things most people overlook: tone changes, subtle tension, the exact moment someone emotionally withdraws. You learned to read between the lines because what wasn't said often mattered more than what was. This isn't magic. It's pattern recognition, trained by experience. When connection feels unpredictable, your brain scans constantly for signs of safety or danger. Over time, that scanning becomes automatic. Even now, part of you is always monitoring. Is this person still engaged? Did I say too much? Is something about to change? And when something does feel off, you don't explode or confront. You store it, analyze it, revisit it later in private. You became very good at holding things inside. Feelings without witnesses, thoughts without listeners, questions without answers. This created a rich inner world, one that could keep you company when nothing outside did. But it also created distance. You can be physically present with people while mentally elsewhere, observing, processing, managing your reactions. Others seem immersed in the moment. You're partly in the moment and partly watching it unfold. It can feel like living life with an internal narrator that never turns off. Because in a way, you learned to parent yourself emotionally. When no one explained your feelings, you had to learn to do it alone. When no one reassured you, you became your own reassurance. When no one mirrored your experience, you became both the one experiencing and the one observing. That level of self-awareness can look like strength, and it is, but it can also be exhausting. Another pattern often emerges from this childhood. You become exceptionally good at understanding other people. You listen carefully. You empathize naturally. You make space for others without demanding space in return. People feel safe around you. They open up quickly. They tell you things they don't tell anyone else, but when the roles reverse, something tightens. Sharing your own messy emotions feels uncomfortable, even risky. Not because you don't want connection, but because you're not sure what will happen if you fully reveal yourself. So you edit. You present the composed version, the manageable version, the version least likely to overwhelm or disappoint. Over time, people know you, but only in pieces. And you may find yourself thinking, I understand them better than they understand me. That imbalance can feel strangely familiar because it is. It echoes the emotional landscape of childhood, being present without being fully seen. You may tell yourself you don't need much, that you're simply private or introverted, and part of that may be true. But sometimes, In quiet moments, another feeling surfaces. Not a craving for attention, but a longing for resonance. The sense that someone else truly gets your inner experience. Humans aren't built to exist entirely in isolation, even when we become very skilled at it. There's also a paradox here. The more self-sufficient you become emotionally, the harder it can be to let others in. Not because you don't care, but because you're used to handling everything alone. When something painful happens, your instinct isn't, "Who can help me?" It's, "How do I deal with this myself?" You think, analyze, reframe, distract, endure. By the time you consider reaching out, the worst has already passed, and the opportunity for support is gone. To others, this looks like strength. Inside, it can feel like quiet isolation. Another long-term effect is hyper-responsibility in relationships. You may feel responsible for maintaining harmony, anticipating problems, smoothing tension before it escalates. Because conflict once felt dangerous, unpredictability uncomfortable, withdrawal deeply painful. So you try to prevent those things from happening. But constantly managing connection leaves little room to simply relax and be. And here's something important. None of this means you're broken. It means your nervous system adapted to an environment where emotional support wasn't consistently available. Those adaptations helped you survive. They also shaped how you approach closeness, trust, and vulnerability today. The same sensitivity that once protected you can also make connection feel overwhelming. The same independence that kept you stable can make receiving care feel unfamiliar. Healing doesn't mean becoming less perceptive or less deep. It means expanding your capacity to include others without losing yourself. That starts with recognizing that not everyone is unsafe, just not everyone is equipped. Some people will misunderstand you. Some won't know how to respond to depth. Some will prefer lighter, simpler interactions. That doesn't make them bad, and it doesn't make you too much. It simply means compatibility matters. The goal isn't universal acceptance. It's finding the few people who don't require you to shrink. Real emotional safety feels different from intensity. It's steady, not dramatic. Predictable, not confusing. Curious, not judgmental. In those spaces, something surprising can happen. You don't have to perform independence. You don't have to monitor every reaction. You don't have to translate yourself constantly. You can just exist, imperfect, complex, human. And perhaps the most powerful shift of all is internal. Learning to treat your own needs as valid, not inconvenient. To speak to yourself with kindness instead of criticism. To recognize that wanting support doesn't erase your strength. The child who learned to survive alone doesn't need to disappear. They deserve compassion. They did something incredibly difficult with very little guidance. Now, as an adult, you have something they didn't: choice. You can still rely on yourself, but you don't have to rely only on yourself. You can remain thoughtful without withdrawing, sensitive without being overwhelmed, independent without being isolated. And maybe the deepest truth is this: you were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were meant to be deeply understood by the right people, the ones who don't fear depth, don't rush vulnerability, and don't disappear when things become real. Those people exist, and when you meet them, connection doesn't feel like effort. It feels like recognition. Until then, the ability to be with yourself, truly with yourself, isn't a flaw. It's a foundation. Not loneliness, but solitude with awareness. Not emptiness, but space waiting for the right resonance. If any part of this felt uncomfortably accurate, it may not be because something is wrong with you. It may be because you've been carrying a story that was never fully seen. And sometimes, the first step toward connection isn't finding someone else, it's finally understanding yourself.